The sound of the lawyer's voice echoed through the cold office, each word cutting through the silence like a rusty blade. Jack Sullivan gripped the worn baseball cap in his hands, twisting the fabric between calloused fingers that bore the marks of a decade fixing engines and rebuilding transmissions. The wall clock ticked mercilessly, counting down the moments until he'd have to explain to his daughter why their final summer at Grandpa Frank's farm would be just that, final. His phone vibrated in his pocket. A text from Mrs. Reynolds, the elderly neighbor, watching Lily. "She's asking about the farm again. Says she's packed her Explorer kit." Jack's chest tightened. At 8 years old, Lily had already mapped out their entire summer vacation. Fishing in the creek, climbing the old oak tree, helping with the chickens that probably wouldn't be there much longer. Jack glanced across the mahogany table at Richard Warner, his cousin in his tailored suit and gleaming watch, his manicured fingers tapping impatiently. Richard's wife Diane sat beside him, pearl earrings catching the fluorescent light as she whispered something that made Richard smirk. Their eyes flicked toward Jack, the failed mechanic, the disappointment, the Sullivan who couldn't keep his marriage or his finances together. The bank notices had started arriving 3 months ago. Final warning, foreclosure imminent. The tow truck had come for his project car last week, the one he'd planned to restore and sell to catch up on rent. Lily had watched from the window, her small face pressed against the glass. "We'll be okay, right, Dad?" The question had hung in the air between them, heavier than any engine block he'd ever lifted. Memories flickered through Jack's mind. Frank's weathered hands guiding his 10-year-old fingers over the disassembled carburetor of the old John Deere tractor. "See how these parts fit together, Jack? This is the heart of the machine. You've got to listen to what it's telling you." The smell of diesel and oil, the patience in his grandfather's voice, the pride when Jack had reassembled it correctly. He'd promised Lily this last visit to the farm before it all disappeared. Even as he'd made the promise, he'd known that whatever inheritance came his way wouldn't be enough to save their situation. Not with his garage business barely breaking even. Not with the medical bills from Lisa's final months still piling up 3 years after her death. Frank's final conversation echoed in his ears. "Jack, you've always been the only one who truly understood the value of what I built here." His grandfather had been propped up in the hospital bed, oxygen tube beneath his nose, but his eyes still sharp as ever. "Remember to listen to what the machines tell you, son. They speak if you know how to hear them." The lawyer cleared his throat, adjusting his glass as he shuffled the papers. "Now, as to the disposition of the Sullivan family farm property and associated holdings." Richard straightened in his chair, the hint of a triumphant smile playing at the corners of his mouth. The other cousins leaned forward slightly, all pretense of mourning momentarily abandoned. Jack remained still, his work boots planted firmly on the polished floor. Frank had been more than his grandfather. He'd been his mentor, his refuge when Jack's life had fallen apart after Lisa's cancer diagnosis. When Jack had struggled as a suddenly single father, it was Frank who had shown him how to be strong for Lily. No matter what the will contained, nothing could take those lessons away. The lawyer's voice droned on, reading through bequests with mechanical precision. Richard would receive the main farmhouse and 80% of the arable land, nearly 400 acres of prime Illinois farmland. Jack's other cousins each received cash settlements in smaller parcels of property. Jack stared at a water stain on the ceiling, trying to quell the bitterness rising in his throat. When the lawyer reached Jack's name, a sudden pause filled the room. Everyone looked up. The lawyer adjusted his glasses again, glancing at Jack with an expression that might have been pity. "To my grandson, Jack Sullivan, who has always known how to listen, I bequeath my 1952 John Deere tractor, the machine that brought me to where I am. May he find what I've hidden for him alone." A ripple of poorly concealed laughter swept through the room. Richard didn't bother hiding his smirk. "How appropriate," he murmured, just loud enough for Jack to hear. "The failed mechanic gets the broken-down tractor. Looks like the old man finally figured out who deserved what." Jack kept his face carefully neutral, but his mind raced over the words. The specific phrasing, "who has always known how to listen," echoed Frank's final advice. And what had he hidden? The tractor had been sitting in the equipment barn untouched for years, its green paint faded and peeling tires deflated. Yet Frank had mentioned it specifically, had connected it to something hidden. The rest of the meeting passed in a blur. Jack signed the necessary papers with mechanical precision, barely registering the sympathetic glance from the lawyer's assistant. Outside, the summer heat hit him like a wall. As he walked to his battered pickup truck, the Sullivan Auto Repair logo faded on the door. He sat in the driver's seat for a long moment before starting the engine, the reality of his situation settling over him. The farm had been his sanctuary, the place where Lily found joy after losing her mother, where Jack had hoped to somehow rebuild their life. Now it would be carved up, developed, erased. The phone rang through the truck's speakers. Mrs. Reynolds again. Jack took a deep breath before answering, trying to keep his voice steady. "Hey, I'm on my way." "She's been drawing pictures of the farm all afternoon," Mrs. Reynolds said, her voice gentle. "Says she's planning where to plant the sunflowers this year." Jack gripped the steering wheel tighter. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. The streets of Riverdale blurred past, the small Midwestern town where generations of Sullivans had bought supplies, sold crops, and built a life. Jack had left after high school, determined to escape the farming life, only to return when Lisa got sick, when they needed family support. Now he felt untethered, drifting with no clear direction. Lily was waiting on Mrs. Reynolds' porch adapts her Explorer backpack, complete with plastic binoculars and a notebook filled with childish drawings of birds and insects, clutched to her chest. Her dark hair was pulled into uneven pigtails, her knees scraped from some recent adventure. When she saw Jack's truck, she bounded down the steps, her face alight with expectation. "Did you get the farm, Dad? Can we go there now?" Her blue eyes, so like Lisa's, shone with excitement. Jack crouched down to her level, his mind racing for the right words. Before he could speak, Lily threw her arms around his neck. "I already packed my farm clothes, and I made a list of all the things I want to show Charlotte." Charlotte was the chicken that had followed Lily around last summer, a relationship documented in dozens of crayon drawings taped to their refrigerator. The words caught in Jack's throat. How do you tell an 8-year-old that the only place she still felt connected to her mother was about to be bulldozed for luxury housing? "We're going to the farm," Jack managed, returning her hug. "But things are going to be a little different this time." In the truck, Lily chattered about her plans. Swimming in the creek, helping Grandpa Frank with the eggs, unaware that her grandfather was gone forever. Jack had tried explaining death to her after the funeral, but Lily seemed to exist in her own reality, where Grandpa was still at the farm waiting for their summer visit. "Grandpa left me his tractor," Jack said finally when Lily paused for breath. "The big green one he used to let you sit on." Lily's eyes widened. "Really? The one with the really tall wheels? Can we drive it? Can I steer?" A faint smile crossed Jack's face. "It needs some work first. It hasn't run in a long time." "You can fix it though, right?" Lily's faith in his mechanical abilities was absolute. "You fix everything." Not everything, Jack thought, remembering Lisa's final weeks. The helplessness as cancer took her, despite every treatment, every prayer, every desperate bargain he tried to make with God. He couldn't fix their broken family or their precarious finances. But maybe he could fix this one last thing for his daughter. "Yeah, Peanut, I'm going to try." The gravel road to the farm crunched beneath the truck's tires, a sound that had always meant homecoming. The mailbox with Sullivan painted in fading letters marked the entrance to the long driveway. The sprawling white farmhouse sat on a gentle rise, its wraparound porch offering views of fields that had produced corn and soybeans for generations. Jack slowed as they approached, noticing Richard's gleaming black SUV parked beside the house. A man in a suit stood with Richard on the porch, gesturing toward the western fields, a tablet in his hands. Development plans already not even a week after the funeral. "Who's that with Uncle Richard?" Lily asked, pressing her face to the window. "Probably a business friend," Jack said, turning toward the equipment barn instead of the house. "No need for a confrontation, not with Lily here. Let's go see the tractor first." The red equipment barn had always been Frank's domain, a cathedral of tools, machines, and the accumulated wisdom of a lifetime working the land. The massive sliding door protested as Jack pushed it open, sending dust motes dancing in the afternoon sunlight that streamed through the high windows. Lily darted in ahead of him, her footsteps echoing on the concrete floor. There it is. The John Deere sat in the back corner, a sleeping giant under a fine layer of dust. Its once vibrant green paint had faded to a muted sage, and the yellow wheels were spotted with rust. The leather seat was cracked and faded, the steering wheel dull with age. Jack walked around it slowly, professionally assessing the work needed. The tires were completely flat, the engine would need a complete rebuild, and he suspected mice had made homes in various components. A full restoration would cost thousands, money he didn't have, but getting it running again might be possible with enough time and ingenuity. "Can I climb up?" Lily was already scrambling onto the massive wheel. Jack lifted her onto the seat where she immediately grabbed the steering wheel, making engine noises. "Grandpa used to let me drive sometimes," she said confidently. "He said I was a natural." Jack smiled despite himself. "Did he now?" "Uh-huh. He said I had magic hands just like you." She spun the wheel enthusiastically. "Can we fix it today, please?" A voice cut through their moment. "Well, isn't this touching?" Richard stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the bright outdoors. The man in the suit waited behind him. "Playing with your inheritance, Jack." Jack straightened instinctively, moving closer to Lily. "Just showing her this tractor." Richard stepped into the barn, his leather loafers incongruous on the oil-stained concrete. "This is David Mercer from Oak Ridge Developments. We're doing a preliminary survey today." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "You have 3 days to remove any personal items before the cleanup crew arrives. That includes your—" He gestured dismissively at the tractor. "Generous bequest." Lily's face fell. "But what about Charlotte and the treehouse and Grandpa's workshop?" Richard barely glanced at her. "The property is being redeveloped, young lady. Progress, you understand. The old house and outbuildings will be coming down next month." "You are going to tear everything down?" Lily's voice rose, tears welling in her eyes. "But this is Grandpa's farm. Where will he live?" A heavy silence fell. Jack moved to Lily's side, placing a hand on her shoulder. Richard's expression flickered between annoyance and awkward pity. "Mr. Mercer, why don't you start checking the Westfield perimeter? I'll join you shortly." When the developer had left, Richard turned back to Jack. "You haven't told her." "She knows," Jack said quietly. "She just doesn't fully understand yet." Richard shook his head. "Always the same Jack, avoiding reality instead of facing it. That's why you're in the situation you're in." He glanced around the barn dismissively. "Don't get any romantic ideas about this place. The tractor's not worth the metal it's made from. The old man was just playing one last joke on you." Lily's small body tensed under Jack's hand. Her voice came out surprisingly steady. "Grandpa never joked about important things." Richard raised an eyebrow. "Out of the mouths of babes." He checked his watch. "Remember, 3 days. Anything left behind becomes property of the estate, meaning me." He turned and walked out, leaving the door open behind him. Lily's tears spilled over. "Is he really going to knock down Grandpa's house? Where will we come for summer? Where will Charlotte live?" Jack lifted her from the tractor seat, holding her close as she cried against his shoulder. He had no answers, no solutions, only the crushing weight of another failure to protect his daughter from loss. But as he stood there, surrounded by Frank's tools and machines, a determination began to form. "We've got 3 days," he said finally. "Let's see if we can get this tractor running before then, as a goodbye present for Grandpa." Lily pulled back, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "And then we can take it home with us." Jack looked at the massive machine, mentally calculating whether his truck could even tow it where he would keep it in their small rented duplex, with its tiny garage already full of tools and parts. "We'll figure something out." The words felt hollow even as he said them, but Lily nodded solemnly. "Grandpa would want us to fix it." Jack spent the rest of the afternoon doing a preliminary assessment of the tractor, explaining each step to Lily as he worked. The battery was long dead, the fuel tank empty, and likely gummed up with old diesel. The engine hadn't turned over in years, but the bones of the machine were good. These old tractors were built to last. "This model is from 1952, Jack explained, wiping dust from the manufacturer's plate. "Just after the war. Your great-grandfather probably bought it new when he expanded the farm." "What's this part called?" Lily pointed to the carburetor. "That's the carburetor. It mixes air and fuel together before it goes into the engine." Jack unscrewed a bolt, revealing the internal components. "See these little jets? They control how much fuel goes through." Lily leaned in close, her earlier tears forgotten in the fascination of mechanical discovery. "And what does that thingy do?" She pointed to the distributor. Jack smiled. This was how Frank had taught him. Patient questions, Hands-on exploration, the gradual revelation of how machines worked. That's the distributor. It sends electricity to the spark plugs at exactly the right moment. He continued the impromptu lesson, showing her how to clean parts with solvent, how to check for wear, how to listen to what the machine was telling you through its condition. As the afternoon wore on, they built a small pile of components that needed repair or replacement. "This is going to be a big job," Jack admitted, wiping his hands on a rag. "We'll need to come back tomorrow with more tools." The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows through the barn door. They would need to find a motel in town. Another expense Jack could ill afford, but unavoidable if they wanted to make the most of their 3 days. As Jack helped Lily down from the tractor, she pointed at the seat. "Dad, look. The screws look different from the rest." Jack examined where she was pointing. The worn leather seat was attached to a metal base with 4 bolts. Unlike the rest of the machine covered in decades of grime and rust, these bolts showed less corrosion. They appeared to have been removed and replaced more recently. "Good eye, Peanut," Jack murmured, running his fingers over the bolts. Frank had been meticulous about his equipment. He wouldn't replace parts without reason, and he certainly wouldn't use newer hardware unless he had to. Jack found a socket wrench in his toolbox and carefully loosened the bolts. The seat came free easily. Too easily for something that should have been rusted in place for decades. He lifted it away, revealing the metal seat base underneath. "What's that?" Lily pointed to a rectangular indentation in the metal about the size of a paperback book. It wasn't part of the original design. Jack's pulse quickened. Frank's words from the will echoed in his mind. "May he find what I've hidden for him alone." Using a flathead screwdriver, Jack carefully pried at the edges of the rectangular panel. After a moment's resistance, it popped free, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside lay a small metal box, tarnished with age but intact. "Is that treasure?" Lily breathed, her eyes wide. Jack lifted the box out carefully. It was heavier than it looked, with the initials FS engraved on the lid. Frank Sullivan. He placed it on the workbench and tried the latch. It opened with a soft click. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, lay 3 items: a small brass key tied to a length of twine, and an old photograph yellowed with age in a folded piece of paper. Jack lifted the photograph, first holding it so Lily could see. It showed a much younger Frank standing proudly beside the very same John Deere tractor, which gleamed with fresh paint. Frank couldn't have been more than 30 in the picture, dressed in overalls, with a confident smile on his face. But what caught Jack's attention was the background. Behind Frank stood a stone barn with an arched entrance and a distinctive rooster weather vane. It wasn't any building Jack recognized from the Sullivan property. He turned the photo over. Written in Frank's neat handwriting were the words, "The Beginning, 1954. "Dad, where is that building? I've never seen it before," Lily said, echoing his thoughts. "I don't know." Jack examined the image more closely. The stone barn was substantial, too significant to have been torn down without him knowing about it. He'd spent nearly every summer of his childhood on this farm, and he thought he knew every inch of the property. The folded paper contained a hand-drawn map, faded but still legible. It showed the rough outline of the Sullivan farm with the main house equipment barn and fields clearly marked. But there in the northern section, where the property backed up against the forest, was an X marked Miller Barn. The brass key hung heavy in Jack's palm, its surface worn smooth from handling. It wasn't a house key or a padlock key. It was older, more substantial, possibly for a large wooden door or a chest. Darkness had fallen outside the barn, now illuminated only by Jack's flashlight. Lily yawned, the excitement of the day catching up with her. "We should find a place to stay for the night," Jack said, carefully returning the items to the box. Whatever Frank had hidden, it would have to wait until morning. As they drove into town, Lily dozed against the passenger door, her Explorer backpack clutched to her chest. Jack's mind raced with possibilities. The hidden compartment, the mysterious barn, the key. Frank had left him more than just a broken-down tractor. He'd left him a mystery, perhaps even a way forward. The Riverdale Inn was a modest 2-story motel on the edge of town, its neon vacancy sign buzzing in the quiet night. Jack paid for a room with his nearly maxed-out credit card, then carried a half-asleep Lily inside. As he tucked her into bed, she stirred. "Dad," her voice was thick with sleep, "are we going to find Grandpa's secret tomorrow?" Jack smoothed her hair back from her forehead. We'll try peanut. I knew the tractor was special, she murmured, her eyes drifting closed. Grandpa wouldn't give you something that wasn't important. Jack sat on the edge of the bed long after Lily had fallen asleep, turning the brass key over in his fingers. What had Frank been trying to tell him? And why had he chosen this roundabout way to do it? Morning came too soon, sunlight streaming through the thin motel curtains. Jack had slept fitfully, his dreams filled with hidden rooms and mysterious barns. Lily, however, woke with boundless energy, already pulling on her clothes and talking about their treasure hunt before Jack had even managed to sit up. We need to find Miss Martha first, Jack said as they finished their breakfast at the local diner. If anyone knows about a stone barn on the property, it'll be her. Martha Jenkins had been Frank's neighbor for over 40 years, her small farmhouse, standing just down the road from the Sullivan place. In his childhood, Jack had often found her and Frank sitting on her front porch drinking lemonade and exchanging stories about the old days. The Jenkins house looked exactly as Jack remembered. White clapboard with green shutters, a porch swing swaying gently in the morning breeze, flower boxes bursting with geraniums. As their truck pulled into the gravel driveway, the front door opened and Martha emerged. At 75, Martha still stood straight and tall, her silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, her movements deliberate but not frail. Her face lit up at the sight of them. Jack Sullivan, as I live and breathe. And is that little Lily? My goodness, how you've grown. Lily raced ahead to receive Martha's hug, while Jack followed more slowly, the metal box tucked under his arm. Martha had been like a grandmother to him, especially after his own parents moved to Arizona, essentially abandoning the family farm to Frank's care. Martha's kitchen smelled of cinnamon and coffee, the checked curtains filtering the morning sunlight into a warm glow. She fussed over Lily producing homemade cookies, seemingly from nowhere, then fixed her keen gaze on Jack. I heard about the reading of the will, she said, her voice gentle but direct. Richards had been strutting around town like a rooster talking about his development plans. I'm sorry, Jack. I know how much the farm means to you. Jack nodded, his throat tight. Frank left me his tractor, the old John Deere. Did he now? Something flickered in Martha's eyes. Knowledge, perhaps, or confirmation. Frank loved that machine, said it was what built everything else. Jack placed the metal box on the kitchen table, opening it to reveal the contents. He also left me this, hidden under the tractor seat. Martha's breath caught as she saw the photograph. She reached for it with slightly trembling fingers. Oh my, I haven't seen the Miller barn in decades. You know it, Jack leaned forward eagerly. I've never seen this building before. Martha nodded slowly. It's on the north edge of Frank's property, deep in the woods past the creek. It was abandoned long before you were born. Her eyes grew distant with memory. The Miller family owned that land before the Sullivans bought it in the 40s. Frank used to spend a lot of time there when he came back from the war. Lily, who had been quietly munching a cookie, perked up. Is it a treasure barn? Does it have secret rooms? Martha smiled at her. It might, little one. Frank never talked much about why he spent time there, but he was mighty protective of it, wouldn't let anyone else go near it. Jack showed her the hand-drawn map. Can you help us find it? This shows it's somewhere in the North Woods, but that's a lot of ground to cover. Martha studied the map, then pointed to a faint line that Jack had taken for a property boundary. This is an old logging trail. It's probably grown over now, but it leads straight to the barn. She looked up at Jack, her expression suddenly serious. If you're going there, be careful. That place holds old secrets. Frank always said it was meant for someone who knew how to listen. There it was again, the same phrase from the will. Someone who knew how to listen. Jack's certainty grew that Frank had left him more than just a broken-down machine. What kind of secrets? He asked. Martha shook her head. Frank never said, not even to me. But back in the 50s, there were strange comings and goings. Men in suits visiting the farm, equipment being delivered at odd hours. She lowered her voice, though they were alone in the kitchen. Some folks said the government was involved somehow. This was during the Cold War, you understand, all kinds of secret projects going on. Lily's eyes were wide as saucers. Was Grandpa a spy? Martha laughed softly. No, child, but he was a smart man, good with machines, and he served in the war. That counted for something in those days. As they prepared to leave, Martha pressed a package of cookies into Lily's hands and pulled Jack aside. Whatever Frank left for you, he meant it as a blessing, not a burden. Remember that. The morning air was fresh and cool as they drove back to the Sullivan farm, the metal box secure in Jack's tool bag. Lily vibrated with excitement beside him, already planning their expedition to find the mysterious barn. "We'll need supplies," she declared. "Water bottles, snacks, a compass." Jack smiled at her enthusiasm. "We've got cookies from Miss Martha. That's a good start." The farm looked different in the morning light, the fields stretching green and gold toward the horizon. Jack parked by the equipment barn again, relieved to see no sign of Richard or his developer friend. Inside, the tractor waited partially disassembled from yesterday's work. Jack spent a few minutes showing Lily how to clean the carburetor jets with compressed air, a task she approached with solemn concentration. "Grandpa showed you how to fix engines, right, Dad?" she asked as she carefully placed the clean parts in a row. "He taught me everything I know about machines," Jack confirmed, checking the fuel lines for deterioration. "Started when I was about your age." Lily's face grew thoughtful. "Do you think he knew you'd find the box under the seat?" Jack paused, considering the question. "I think he hoped I would. He knew I'd understand the clues." "Because you know how to listen," Lily nodded sagely. "Like to the engines." "Exactly like that," Jack ruffled her hair. "Ready to go find this mysterious barn." They gathered their supplies, water bottles, Martha's cookies, Jack's tool bag with the metal box, and Lily's Explorer backpack, now containing her binoculars, notebook, and a small compass her mother had given her before she died. The North Woods began about a half-mile from the main house beyond the cornfields and past a small creek that divided the property. Jack carried Lily across the creek on his shoulders, her delighted squeals echoing through the trees as her feet dangled above the water. The forest was dense here, old-growth trees, creating a canopy that dappled the forest floor with patches of sunlight. No obvious trail presented itself, but Jack oriented them using the map and Lily's compass, heading north by northeast where Martha had indicated. "Keep your eyes open for anything that looks like a path," Jack instructed, pushing aside a low-hanging branch. "It might be really overgrown." Lily took her assignment seriously, darting ahead and then circling back, examining fallen logs and clusters of ferns with the thoroughness of a trained scout. The forest was alive with sound, birds calling, insects buzzing, the rustle of small animals in the underbrush. They had been walking for almost 40 minutes when Lily called out, "Dad, look at these rocks." Jack made his way to where she was pointing. A line of large stones half buried in moss and soil created a subtle boundary that would be easy to miss if you weren't looking for it. They were too regular to be natural, too deliberate in their placement. "Good eye," Jack said, examining the stones more closely. "These were put here on purpose." He looked beyond them and noticed a slight depression in the forest floor, running roughly east to west. "I think this might be the old trail." Once they knew what to look for, the path became more evident. Not a clear trail, but a corridor where the trees grew slightly farther apart, where the underbrush was less dense. They followed it deeper into the woods, the air growing cooler and damper as the canopy thickened overhead. The fog began about 100 yards later, thin wisps at first, then thicker patches that wrapped around tree trunks and obscured the distance. It gave the forest an otherworldly quality, muting sounds and diffusing the sunlight into a soft golden haze. "It's like a fairy tale," Lily whispered, sticking close to Jack now. "Is the barn going to be made of gingerbread?" Jack smiled but kept his senses alert. The fog was unusual for a warm summer day, possibly created by some quirk of the terrain, a hidden spring perhaps, or a low-lying area where cool air pooled. They crested a small rise and the path dipped down into a clearing. As they descended, the fog began to thin, revealing glimpses of what lay ahead. Lily gasped, first grabbing Jack's hand and pointing. "There it is." The Miller barn stood like a sentinel from another era, its stone walls weathered but intact, rising to a steep roof now partially collapsed on one side. An arched entrance gaped open like a mouth, dark and inviting. And there, at the very peak of the roof, was the rooster weather vane from the photograph, now tilted at a precarious angle. Vines crawled up the walls and a broken wooden fence surrounded the structure, its posts leaning at odd angles. Nature had begun the slow process of reclamation, but the barn itself remained solid built to withstand decades of neglect. "It looks exactly like the picture," Jack murmured, taking out the photograph to compare. The only differences were the weathering of time, the roof damage, the encroaching vegetation, the general air of abandonment. They approached slowly, stepping through a gap in the dilapidated fence. Up close, the stonework was impressive. Large blocks fitted together with precision, the mark of skilled masons. The arched entrance was higher than it had appeared from a distance, easily tall enough to allow farm equipment to pass through. "Can we go inside?" Lily's voice wavered between excitement and apprehension. Jack examined the structure carefully. Despite the partial roof collapse on the far side, the entrance and main section appeared solid. "Stay close to me," he instructed, taking her hand. The massive wooden doors hung partially open, one off its hinges entirely. Jack pushed gently on the other, which groaned in protest but moved, widening the opening enough for them to slip through. Inside, the air was cool and still heavy, with the sense of old wood, damp stone, and years of abandonment. Dust motes danced in the shafts of light that penetrated through holes in the roof and the high, narrow windows. The space was cavernous, the ceiling rising to exposed beams 30 feet above. Old stalls lined one wall, their wooden partitions sagging but intact. Farm implements hung on hooks or leaned against walls. Pitchforks, shovels, tools, whose purposes were no longer immediately apparent. Everything was covered in a thick layer of dust and cobwebs untouched for decades. "It's huge," Lily whispered, her voice echoing slightly in the vast space. "Why would Grandpa have a secret barn?" Jack shook his head, moving further into the space. "I don't know, Peanut, but we're going to find out." They explored methodically, Jack checking structural stability as they went. The barn had been built to last its stone walls, nearly 2 feet thick in places. Despite the years of neglect, it remained fundamentally sound, except for the roof damage on the far side where they avoided venturing. Near the back wall, Jack found what appeared to be a workshop area, a sturdy wooden bench, shelves with jars and containers, and a collection of tools that looked more specialized than standard farm equipment. Some bore Frank's initials carved or stamped into their handles. "Dad, look." Lily had wandered a few yards away, investigating a pile of what appeared to be old hay. "I found tracks." Jack joined her, crouching to examine what she'd discovered. Clear in the dust and debris were footprints, human footprints, alongside what appeared to be wheel marks, narrow and straight, like those from a cart or dolly. "These aren't very old," Jack said, running his fingers along the impressions. "Maybe a few months." "Was Grandpa still coming here?" Lily asked. "Even when he was old?" The thought was sobering. Frank had been in his 80s, his health failing for the past year. The idea of him making the trek through the woods to this isolated barn raised more questions than it answered. As Jack straightened, his eyes caught a different angle of the barn's interior, and he noticed something he'd missed before. Against the back wall, partially hidden by shadows, stood a wooden ladder leading to a loft area above the old stalls. "Let's check up there," he said, pointing. The ladder creaked ominously as Jack tested it with his weight, but the wood held firm. "I'll go first," he told Lily. "Stay here until I make sure it's safe." The loft was surprisingly intact, its floorboards solid beneath Jack's feet. Dust billowed with each step, tickling his nose and making the air hazy. A small window at the far end provided enough light to see by, casting long, slanted shadows across the space. "It's okay," he called down to Lily. "Come up slowly." As Lily carefully climbed the ladder, Jack surveyed the loft. It was mostly empty except for a few rotting hay bales and what appeared to be an old tarp covering something large in the corner, furthest from the window. Lily reached the top, her face flushed with the effort and excitement. "What's up here?" "Not sure yet." Jack moved toward the tarp-covered object, his footsteps echoing on the wooden floor. "But I think we're about to find out." He grasped the edge of the tarp, pulling it away in a cloud of dust that set them both coughing. When the air cleared, they found themselves staring at a large wooden chest, its dark wood polished by years of handling. Unlike everything else in the barn, it showed signs of care. No dust had accumulated on its surface, and the brass fittings gleamed dully in the dim light. And there at the center of the lid was a keyhole that matched the brass key from a Frank's metal box. "The treasure chest," Lily breathed, her eyes wide, "just like in the stories." Jack removed the key from his pocket, feeling its weight in his palm. The coincidence was too perfect, the trail too deliberate. Frank had led them here for a reason, had preserved this chest and its contents against time and the elements. The key slid into the lock with a soft click, turning easily, despite the decades that had passed since Frank had hidden it beneath the tractor seat. Jack lifted the heavy lid, which rose on well-oiled hinges. The chest contained several items carefully arranged: a leather-bound notebook, bundles of papers tied with twine, a collection of small wooden boxes, and what appeared to be technical drawings rolled into tubes. Jack lifted out the notebook first. The leather was soft with age, the pages yellowed at the edges. On the first page, written in Frank's unmistakable blocky handwriting, were the words, "For the one who listens." A lump formed in Jack's throat. These words repeated in the will, and now here were clearly meant for him. Frank had been preparing this legacy for years, perhaps decades, waiting for Jack to discover it. "What does it say, Dad?" Lily pressed against his side, trying to see. Jack opened to the first entry, dated April 1952. "I bought the John Deere today," he read aloud. "Paid cash with my Army savings. The dealer thought I was crazy investing so much in a machine, but this tractor is going to build everything else. A man needs the right tools to create a legacy." The next entries detailed Frank's early years on the farm, the struggles with weather and finances, the satisfaction of the first successful harvests, the gradual expansion of the Sullivan holdings. Frank wrote with simple clarity about the challenges and joys of working the land, his descriptions bringing to life a younger, more adventurous man than the grandfather Jack had known. Then in entries from late 1953, the tone changed. "Strange sounds from the North Woods last night. Metal on metal like machinery underground. Investigated at dawn but found nothing visible. The Miller barn stands untouched, but something has changed in the air around it." And later, "A man named Harrington visited today. Government credentials, though he wouldn't specify which department. Asked a lot of questions about the property, particularly the northern section. Offered to buy that portion for 10 times its value. I refused." Jack read these entries aloud to Lily, whose imagination was clearly captured by the mystery unfolding. The journal continued describing more visits from government officials, equipment deliveries to the Miller barn in the dead of night, and Frank's growing suspicion about what was happening on his land. December 18th, 1953. "They've shown me what they're building. God help us all if this power falls into the wrong hands. I've agreed to their terms. The project can continue on my land, but under strict conditions. This technology must be protected, preserved for a time when the world is ready for it." Jack's reading was interrupted by the distant sound of a vehicle. He closed the journal, moving quickly to the small loft window. From this vantage point, he could see a portion of the clearing, and there, emerging from the forest path, was Richard's black SUV. "We need to hide," Jack whispered, gathering the journal and key. "Someone's coming." Lily's eyes widened in alarm. "Is it the bad guys from Grandpa's story?" "It's Richard," Jack said quickly, but carefully returning the items to the chest and closing the lid. "And probably his developer friend. We don't want them to know we've found this place." They scrambled down the ladder, Jack lifting Lily for the last few feet to minimize noise. The barn's cavernous interior offered several hiding places. Jack led them to a row of old horse stalls where thick wooden partitions and accumulated debris would shield them from casual observation. They crouched behind the largest stall, Jack's arm protectively around Lily's shoulders. Outside, car doors slammed, followed by voices growing louder as they approached the barn. "The survey maps show an anomaly here," an unfamiliar voice was saying. "Ground-penetrating radar indicates a significant structure beneath the surface." "My grandfather never mentioned anything like that." Richard's dismissive tone carried clearly. "This old barn was here when he bought the place. Probably just a root cellar or something equally worthless." The massive doors groaned as they were pushed wider. Footsteps echoed on the stone floor, two sets moving with purpose through the open space. "This building isn't on any of the county records," the developer said. "That's unusual for a structure this size." "The old man was paranoid about government interference," Richard replied. "Probably kept it off the books to avoid property taxes." The footsteps moved further into the barn, approaching the area where Jack and Lily hid. Lily pressed closer to Jack, her breathing quick but silent. Jack put a finger to his lips, reminding her to stay quiet. "The readings are strongest here," the developer said, his voice now alarmingly close. "Whatever's down there, it's big and deep." "How much are we talking about?" Richard asked, his tone shifting from dismissal to interest. "For the extraction. If it's what I think it is, millions. Maybe tens of millions, depending on concentration and accessibility. The Energy Department has been looking for sites like this for years. And it's all legally mine now," Richard said with satisfaction. I want to expedite everything. How soon can your team start preliminary work? We'll need to demolish this structure first. Get proper equipment in. I'd say 2 weeks, assuming we can fast-track the permits. Make it 1 week. I'll handle the local officials. The footsteps began to move away, but the developer paused. What about your cousin, the one who got the tractor? Does he know anything about this place? Richard's laugh was sharp and dismissive. Jack, he's a small-town mechanic who can barely keep his garage afloat. Trust me, if he knew about any of this, he'd have cashed in years ago. Their voices faded as they exited the barn, followed by the sound of the SUV starting up and driving away. Jack waited several long minutes before moving, making absolutely certain they were gone. What were they talking about, Dad? Lily whispered, her face pale with the tension of their hiding. What's under the barn? Jack shook his head, helping her to her feet. I'm not sure, but I think it's what Frank was protecting all these years. He looked back at the ladder leading to the loft to the chest with its secrets. And now it's up to us to figure out what to do next. They climbed back to the loft, Jack's mind racing with the implications of what they'd overheard. Energy department. Extraction. Millions. Whatever lay beneath the Miller barn, Richard and his developer friend intended to exploit it. And soon. The wooden chest waited, its contents barely explored. Jack lifted the journal again, along with one of the rolled technical drawings. The paper was yellowed but well preserved, protected by the chest's solid construction. He unrolled it carefully on the dusty floorboards. The drawing showed what appeared to be a complex mechanical system. Pipes, chambers, generators, all integrated into an underground facility. Notes in Frank's handwriting filled the margins, along with official-looking stamps marked Classified and Project Horizon. What is it? Lily asked, studying the drawing with intense curiosity. I think it's some kind of power generation system, Jack said, slowly recognizing elements of hydraulics and electrical engineering. Something experimental, something valuable. He turned to the journal again, flipping through until he found entries from early 1954. The system is operational, he read. The test results exceed all expectations. Harrington says this could change everything. Clean energy, unlimited potential. But the oil companies are already applying pressure. There's talk of shutting us down. Later entries grew more cryptic. Project officially terminated today. Harrington gave me the choice. Let them dismantle everything or accept compensation to maintain and protect what we built. I chose to protect it. Some technologies aren't meant to be lost, even if they must be hidden. Jack looked up from the journal, a new understanding dawning. Frank wasn't just a farmer. He was a guardian. He knew about whatever's beneath this barn, some kind of revolutionary energy technology that powerful interests wanted buried. One of the small wooden boxes contained something unexpected. Gold coins, dozens of them, their surfaces still gleaming after decades in storage. Another held what appeared to be official government bonds, their face values substantial even by today's standards. Is that real treasure? Lily gasped, her finger hovering above the gold coins. I think it was Frank's payment, Jack said, for keeping the secret. He stared at the small fortune untouched for decades while Frank lived modestly, while Jack's parents struggled, while Jack himself faced financial ruin. Why hadn't Frank used these resources? The answer came as he continued reading the journal. The money is blood money, Frank had written. Payment for silence, for complicity in burying knowledge that could help humanity. I cannot spend it with a clear conscience, but neither can I reveal what lies beneath the Miller barn. Not until the world is ready, not until the right person can protect and use this knowledge responsibly. Jack sat back on his heels, the weight of understanding settling over him. Frank hadn't left him a broken-down tractor. He'd left him a legacy, a responsibility, and the means to secure his and Lily's future. But it came with a moral challenge, one that Frank himself had wrestled with for decades. Dad, Lily's voice pulled him from his thoughts. Does this mean we're rich now? Jack looked at his daughter's hopeful face, then back at the contents of the chest. The gold, the bonds, the technical secrets worth millions to the right buyers. Richard planned to extract whatever resource lay beneath the barn, likely destroying whatever technology Frank had protected in the process. The tractor, the key, The hidden barn, it had all been Frank's way of testing Jack, of ensuring that his legacy passed to someone who would understand its true value. Someone who knew how to listen not just to machines, but to the moral imperative behind them. It means we have choices now, Jack said finally, and responsibilities, just like Grandpa did. As they carefully repacked the chest planning to return with proper tools to transport its contents, Jack's mind was already working on next steps. They had 3 days before Richard's cleanup crew arrived, 3 days to secure Frank's legacy and decide how to proceed. The fog had lifted by the time they emerged from the barn, the summer sun high overhead. Lily skipped ahead on the path, her explorer's spirit fully revived by their discoveries. Jack followed more slowly, the journal secure in his backpack, the weight of Frank's trust heavy on his shoulders. Whatever lay beneath the Miller barn, whatever technology Frank had guarded for all these years, it wasn't just about money or power. It was about doing what was right with knowledge that could change the world for better or worse. As they reached the edge of the forest, the Sullivan farmhouse visible in the distance across the fields, Jack made his decision. They would restore the tractor first, the key to everything else. Then they would find a way to protect the Miller barn and its secrets from Richard and his developer friends. Frank had chosen Jack because he knew how to listen, to machines, to the lessons of the past, to the quiet voice of conscience that distinguishes right from wrong. Now it was time to prove that trust had not been misplaced. Lily turned back, waiting for him at the forest's edge, her small figure backlit by the afternoon sun. The future, uncertain but suddenly full of possibility, stretched before them like the Sullivan fields ready for harvest. Dawn broke over the Sullivan farm with golden fingers of light stretching across the fields. Jack stood in the equipment barn, Frank's journal open beside him on the workbench, the tractor partially disassembled before him. He'd been there since 5 a.m., unable to sleep as the magnitude of their discovery churned in his mind. The pages of Frank's journal revealed a story that seemed impossible, yet the evidence was undeniable. In the early 1950s, at the height of the Cold War, the U.S. government had secretly funded experimental energy research projects in remote locations across the country. Frank's northern acreage, with its unique geological features and isolated position, had been selected as one of these sites. Project Horizon, they'd called it. According to Frank's meticulous notes, engineers had constructed an advanced hydroelectric system that harnessed underground water sources in ways conventional technology couldn't match. The system generated electricity without fossil fuels, without pollution, and most remarkably, without massive infrastructure. Jack ran his finger over a technical drawing that showed interlocking turbine components. Something about the design tugged at his mechanical intuition. It was decades ahead of its time, yet also oddly familiar, like finding the source code for technology that had evolved into common use. The barn door creaked open behind him, sending a shaft of brighter light across the concrete floor. Lily's small figure appeared in the doorway, still in her pajamas, stuffed rabbit dangling from one hand. "You didn't wake me up?" Jack glanced at his watch, surprised to see it was already past 7. "Sorry, Peanut, I got an early start." Lily approached the workbench, standing on tiptoes to see what he was doing. Her eyes widened at the array of parts laid out in precise order. "Are you fixing the tractor?" "Trying to." Jack gently closed the journal. He'd stayed up most of the night reading it, absorbing the technical details, the government pressure, the moral dilemmas Frank had faced. The deeper he read, the more he understood why his grandfather had chosen such an elaborate method to pass on this legacy. The tractor was more than just transportation or farm equipment. For Frank, it had been the first step, the machine that built everything else. And now it was the key to Jack's next steps, both symbolically and practically. "Can I help?" Lily climbed onto a stool, her face earnest in the morning light. "Absolutely." Jack handed her a soft cloth and a small container of cleaning solution. "These parts need to be completely clean before we can reassemble them." As they worked, Jack explained each component just as Frank had once taught him. The carburetor, the fuel pump, the ignition system. Each part had a purpose. Each connection mattered. Lily listened intently, her small hands carefully mimicking his movements. "The thing about old machines," Jack explained, showing her how to check for wear on a valve, "is that they were built to last forever. Not like new stuff that's designed to break down so you have to replace it. With the right care, this tractor could run another 70 years. Lily considered this, her brow furrowed in concentration. Is that why Grandpa kept it? Because it could last forever. Jack paused, struck by the innocent wisdom in her question. I think that was part of it. He valued things that endured. Like the technology beneath the Miller barn, something so valuable that Frank had protected it for decades, choosing preservation over profit. By mid-morning, they had cleaned and inspected most of the engine components. Jack had made a list of parts that needed replacement. Gaskets, seals the fuel line. Nothing that couldn't be found at the auto parts store in town. We need to make a supply run, Jack announced, wiping his hands on a rag. And we should check out the house too, see if there's anything else Frank left for us. The main farmhouse stood silent and imposing in the late morning sun, its white clapboard siding in need of fresh paint, its wraparound porch sagging slightly at one corner. Jack hadn't been inside since the funeral. The prospect of entering without Frank's presence made his chest tight with grief. Lily had no such hesitation, bounding up the porch steps and trying the door. It's locked. Jack joined her, fishing in his pocket for his key ring. The old brass key that had opened every Sullivan door for generations still hung there, rarely used but never discarded. The lock turned with a stubborn groan. Inside the house smelled of dust and disuse. Frank had spent his final months in the hospital, not here. Furniture draped with white sheets created ghostly silhouettes in the dim light. Lily moved through the space with uncharacteristic quiet, as if sensing the weight of absence. In Frank's study, Jack found himself drawn to the roll-top desk where his grandfather had handled farm business for decades. The surface was cluttered with papers, bills, seed catalogs, equipment manuals, preserved in the exact state Frank had left them. A photograph in a simple wooden frame caught his attention. It showed a much younger Frank in Army uniform standing with three other men in front of what appeared to be a military laboratory. The inscription on the back read, Camp Horizon 1945, where it all began. Camp Horizon, Project Horizon. The connections were falling into place. Frank had been recruited for the energy project because of specialized knowledge he'd gained during the war, not just mechanical skills, but perhaps classified research experience. Lily's voice called from upstairs, Dad, come look. He found her in Frank's bedroom, pointing excitedly at something on the wall. What had appeared at first glance to be a decorative compass hanging above the bed was actually a sophisticated gauge of some kind, its needle pointing steadily northwest. Jack carefully lifted it from its hook. The back panel detached to reveal intricate wiring in what looked like a small battery compartment, except there were no batteries. Just a tiny sealed glass tube containing a glowing blue substance. What is it? Lily leaned closer, fascinated by the soft blue glow. I'm not sure. Jack turned it over in his hands, noting the fine craftsmanship. But I think it's pointing toward the Miller barn. They spent the next hour searching the house methodically, looking for anything else that might connect to Frank's secret project. In the kitchen pantry, behind cans of preserved vegetables, they discovered a metal lockbox containing topographic maps of the property with detailed annotations about underground water flows. In the attic, a trunk full of technical manuals for equipment that had never been used on the farm. Turbines, generators, pressure systems. By the time they left for town, Jack's truck was filled with boxes of Frank's papers and the salvaged mechanical parts from the tractor. Lily clutched the strange compass in her lap, watching with fascination as the needle remained fixed on its northwestern heading, no matter how they turned. It's like magic, she whispered, tilting it back and forth. But Grandpa didn't believe in magic, did he? No, he believed in science. Jack navigated the familiar country roads, his mind racing with theories. Sometimes really advanced science looks like magic to people who don't understand it. Like Arthur C. Clarke said, Lily nodded with the solemn wisdom of a child repeating something learned in school. Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. Jack glanced at her in surprise. Where did you learn that? From Mom. A shadow passed over Lily's face. She read me science fiction stories when I was little. The mention of Lisa sent a familiar pang through Jack's heart. She'd been the dreamer in their relationship, the one who saw possibilities where Jack saw practicalities. She would have been fascinated by the mystery of Project Horizon, would have immediately grasped the implications in a way that Jack, with his nuts and bolts mentality, was still struggling to comprehend. Riverdale's Main Street hadn't changed in decades. The same brick storefronts, the same diagonal parking, the same traffic light at Center Avenue that still turned yellow for too brief a moment. They stopped first at O'Malley's Auto Parts, where Jack ordered the replacement components for the tractor. Sullivan Farm, huh? Old Mr. O'Malley peered at him over reading glasses. Heard Richard's selling to developers. Damn shame. Nothing's final yet, Jack replied, surprising himself with the firmness in his voice. Yesterday, he'd accepted the loss of the farm as inevitable. Today, armed with Frank's secrets, he felt the stirrings of a plan. At the hardware store, they purchased tools they'd need for the Miller barn, heavy-duty flashlights, fresh batteries, a portable generator. Jack found himself studying the faces of other customers, suddenly aware of the value of what they'd discovered. If Richard and his developer friend knew about the underground facility, who else might be watching? They grabbed lunch at Maggie's diner where Lily demolished a chocolate milkshake, and Jack picked at a sandwich, his appetite suppressed by the weight of decisions looming before him. 3 tables away, Richard's voice carried clearly as he held court with several local businessmen, boasting about the luxury housing development that would finally bring Riverdale into the 21st century. Jack kept his head down, but Lily stared openly at her Uncle Chocolate smeared on her upper lip. He's going to destroy the barn, isn't he? Her question came just loud enough to reach the neighboring tables. Not if we can help it, Jack whispered, wiping her mouth with a napkin. But right now we need to be smart. That means keeping what we found a secret. They slipped out without Richard noticing their presence, hurrying back to the truck with their supplies. As Jack loaded the last bag, a heavy hand clapped him on the shoulder. He turned to find David Mercer, the developer who'd been surveying the farm with Richard. Sullivan, right? Jack Sullivan? Mercer's smile didn't reach his eyes. I didn't get a chance to properly introduce myself yesterday. David Mercer, Oak Ridge Developments. Jack nodded stiffly, conscious of Lily watching from inside the truck. Mr. Mercer, please call me David. He leaned casually against the truck. I understand you're something of a mechanical genius. Richard mentioned you restore old equipment. I run an auto repair shop. Jack's guard went up immediately. Nothing special. Don't sell yourself short. Skills like yours are valuable. Mercer's gaze was calculating. In fact, we might have an opportunity for you with our new development. We'll need someone to maintain the generator's water systems, all that infrastructure. Jack's pulse quickened. This wasn't a casual conversation. It was reconnaissance. I appreciate the offer, but I've got my own business to run. Of course, of course. Mercer produced a business card. But if you happen to come across anything interesting on the property, old maps, unusual equipment, anything that might help us understand the land better, I'd make it worth your while. Jack took the card automatically, his mouth dry. I'll keep that in mind. Back in the truck, Lily's eyes were wide. Was that one of the bad guys? Not bad exactly. Jack started the engine, watching Mercer through the rearview mirror as he returned to the diner. Just someone who wants what Grandpa was protecting. The remaining daylight hours were devoted to the tractor. Jack worked methodically, installing the new parts, cleaning connections, testing components. Lily assisted where she could, handing him tools and absorbing his explanations about mechanical systems with an attentiveness that reminded him powerfully of himself at her age. By sunset, the John Deere's engine block was reassembled, the fuel system cleaned and primed with fresh diesel. The electrical system would need more work, but the bones of the machine were coming together. Will it run tomorrow? Lily yawned, her energy finally flagging after the long day. Maybe. Jack wiped grease from his hands. But we still have the Miller barn to explore more thoroughly, and we need to figure out what Richard and Mercer are really planning. They returned to the motel as darkness fell, Lily falling asleep almost immediately after dinner. Jack spread Frank's papers across the small table by the window, piecing together the puzzle of Project Horizon, from technical diagrams, journal entries, and official documents. The story that emerged was both fascinating and troubling. In the aftermath of World War II, the U.S. government had launched numerous classified research initiatives aimed at energy independence. Project Horizon had been one of the more promising efforts, a system that used natural underground water pressure combined with an innovative turbine design to generate clean electricity. Frank had been recruited because of his wartime work on experimental engines, his mechanical aptitude, and his isolated property with ideal geological conditions. Initial tests had exceeded expectations, suggesting the technology could revolutionize America's energy infrastructure. Then came the interference. Frank's journal documented increasing pressure from what he called petroleum interests, powerful companies that saw the technology as a threat to their dominance. Political connections were leveraged, funding was questioned, and eventually the project was officially terminated. But rather than dismantling the facility, the project lead, Dr. William Harrington, had made a deal with Frank. The technology would remain intact, hidden beneath the Miller barn, preserved for a time when political pressures might be different. Frank received compensation in gold and bonds sworn to secrecy about what lay beneath his land. For decades, Frank had maintained the facility in secret, occasionally allowing Harrington and a skeleton crew to visit for maintenance. The last entry in the journal, dated just 3 months before Frank's death, described a final visit from an elderly Harrington who believed the time for revealing the technology was approaching as climate concerns mounted. "The world needs this now," Frank had written, "but the wrong hands would weaponize it or bury it again. The right person must carry this forward, someone who understands both the mechanics and the responsibility." Jack closed the journal, his mind heavy with the implications. Frank hadn't just left him a hidden fortune, he'd entrusted him with technology that could potentially change the world's energy paradigm, and all the danger that came with it. Morning brought new determination. They returned to the farm early, Jack carrying the portable generator and additional tools. The tractor awaited in the equipment barn, partially reassembled, a collection of parts laid out in precise order on a tarp beside it. "Let's get the electrical system working," Jack announced, connecting a multimeter to the battery terminals. "Then we can see if this old girl will start." The work was meticulous and time-consuming. Jack replaced corroded wires, cleaned connection points, and tested circuits. Lily watched intently, occasionally sliding her small hands into tight spaces where Jack's couldn't reach. "Grandpa used to let me hold the flashlight," she said, directing a beam exactly where Jack needed it. "He said I had the steadiest hands he'd ever seen." By noon, the electrical system was functioning. Jack connected a new battery, checking voltage readings across multiple circuits. Satisfied, he moved to the ignition system, carefully adjusting the timing and replacing the ancient spark plugs. Almost ready for the moment of truth, Jack wiped sweat from his forehead, leaving a streak of grease. "Want to help me fill the fuel tank?" They poured fresh diesel fuel into the tank, Jack explaining the importance of filtering out any contaminants. Each step was methodical, careful, not just repairing, but reviving a machine that had meant so much to Frank. Finally, there was nothing left but to try starting it. Jack climbed onto the seat, adjusting controls and checking gauges. Lily stood a safe distance away, practically vibrating with excitement. "Fingers crossed," Jack called, turning the key and pressing the starter button. The engine coughed, sputtered, then fell silent. Jack frowned, making minor adjustments to the choke and fuel settings before trying again. This time the engine turned over longer, but still failed to catch. "Third time's the charm." Jack's voice remained confident for Lily's benefit, though concern began to creep in. If they couldn't get the tractor running, moving equipment from the Miller barn would be infinitely more difficult. He turned the key again, and this time the engine roared to life, belching a cloud of black smoke before settling into a rough idle. Jack adjusted the throttle, listening intently to the sounds of the motor. After a moment, the rough edges smoothed out, and the John Deere purred with surprising vitality for a machine that had sat dormant for years. Lily's cheer echoed through the barn. Jack revved the engine experimentally, satisfaction spreading through him as the tractor responded perfectly. Frank would have been proud, not just of the mechanical revival, but of the larger legacy it represented. "Can I ride with you?" Lily was already scrambling toward the tractor, her caution forgotten in the excitement of success. Jack helped her up, settling her securely in front of him on the seat. He engaged the clutch and put the tractor in gear, and slowly, majestically, the green giant rolled forward out of the barn and into the sunlight. They made a triumphant circle of the barnyard, the engine's steady rumble attracting curious looks from birds and rabbits. Lily beamed with pride, her hands gripping the edge of the seat as if she were piloting a spaceship. "We did it, Dad. We fixed Grandpa's tractor." Jack cut the engine, letting the sudden silence emphasize the moment. "Now we can move whatever we need from the Miller barn." With the tractor operational, their next priority was to retrieve the wooden chest from the loft. They loaded tools and supplies onto a small trailer hitched to the John Deere and set off across the fields toward the North Woods. The tractor made the journey much easier, forging a path through tall grass and navigating around tree stumps with surprising agility. When they reached the edge of the woods, Jack switched to a lower gear, carefully maneuvering between trees along the faint trail they'd discovered earlier. The Miller barn appeared exactly as they'd left it, standing solid and mysterious in its clearing. Jack parked the tractor near the entrance, the engine ticking as it cooled in the shade. "I feel like real explorers now," Lily announced, jumping down from the seat and retrieving her backpack. "Like Indiana Jones, but for science stuff." Inside the barn, dust motes still danced in the shafts of sunlight penetrating the high windows. Jack switched on his heavy-duty flashlight, illuminating corners that had remained in shadow during their previous visit. Along the rear wall, something caught his attention, a section of stonework that appeared slightly different from the surrounding pattern. He ran his hand across it, feeling a subtle difference in texture and temperature. "Lily, shine your light here." When both beams converged on the wall, the difference became more apparent. A rectangular section approximately 3 feet wide and 7 feet high had been constructed with stones of a slightly different color. The mortar lines were also minutely thinner. Jack pressed experimentally against various stones, searching for a mechanism. Nothing moved. He stepped back, considering the puzzle from a different angle. If this was indeed a hidden entrance to the underground facility, the opening mechanism would be secure, but accessible to those who knew its secret. His eyes traced the massive wooden beams supporting the barn's structure, noting how one in particular lined up with the anomalous section of wall. Following the beam upward, he spotted a metal plate where it joined another crossbeam. "I need to check something." Jack retrieved a folding ladder from their supplies, setting it up beneath the junction of beams. Climbing carefully, he examined the metal plate and found what he suspected: a small, almost invisible keyhole. The brass key from Frank's box fit perfectly. When Jack turned it, a soft click echoed through the barn, followed by a more substantial mechanical sound from within the wall. The rectangular section of stonework shifted inward by several inches, then slid smoothly to one side, revealing a dark passage beyond. Cool air rushed out, carrying a faint metallic scent and the distant sound of running water. Jack and Lily stood transfixed, staring into the darkness that seemed to pulse with potential. "A secret door," Lily whispered, her voice mixing awe and apprehension. "Just like in the books Mom used to read me." Jack switched his flashlight to its brightest setting, illuminating a concrete passageway that descended at a gentle angle. Metal handrails lined both sides, and overhead lighting fixtures, long dormant, were installed at regular intervals. "We need to be careful," Jack cautioned, checking that the portable generator was easily accessible. "Stay close to me." The passage extended approximately 50 feet before opening into a larger space. As they descended, the temperature dropped noticeably and the sound of water grew louder. Not a drip or trickle, but the substantial flow of a subterranean stream. At the bottom of the passage, Jack paused to survey what lay before them. They stood at the edge of an underground chamber, roughly the size of a basketball court. Massive pipes emerged from one rock wall, connecting to a series of turbines arranged in a cascading pattern. Control panels lined another wall, their displays dark but intact beneath a layer of dust. "What is all this?" Lily's voice echoed slightly in the cavernous space. "It's a power plant," Jack replied, moving further into the chamber. "A very special one." He located what appeared to be a main control panel and examined it carefully. The design was older but surprisingly sophisticated, with backup systems and safety protocols that would still be considered advanced today. A large switch marked main power stood in the off position. Jack hesitated, considering the risks of activating a system that had lain dormant for years. But without power, they couldn't fully explore or understand what they'd discovered. He flipped the switch. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a series of clicks echoed through the chamber as relays engaged. Lights flickered overhead, struggling to life after decades of darkness. A low hum built gradually as systems awakened and gauges began to register pressure and flow rates. The chamber filled with soft, blue-white light, revealing details that had been hidden in shadow. The facility was larger than Jack had initially estimated, with additional rooms branching off from the main chamber. Signs on doors indicated research lab, control room, and generator hall. What struck him most was the cleanliness of the design. No smoke, no fire, no obvious fuel source. Just the controlled flow of water through ingeniously designed turbines creating electricity with minimal environmental impact. It's beautiful, Jack murmured, understanding now why Frank had protected this place so fiercely. It wasn't just valuable, it was visionary. They explored methodically, Jack documenting everything with his phone's camera. The research lab contained filing cabinets full of technical data and experimental results. The control room housed monitoring equipment and communication systems. The generator hall featured larger versions of the turbines in the main chamber, clearly designed for industrial-scale production. In what appeared to be an office, they found personal items belonging to the original research team. Coffee mugs, photographs, even a sweater draped over a chair back, as if its owner had just stepped out momentarily instead of decades ago. A framed photograph on the desk showed Frank with four other men, all smiling proudly in front of the completed facility. The inscription read, "Project Horizon Team 1954, the future begins here." Jack checked his watch, surprised to find that 2 hours had passed. "We should get back to the chest in the loft. That's our priority for today." Powering down the facility, they retraced their steps to the surface. The stone door closed automatically behind them, sealing the underground complex from unwanted discovery. In the loft, the wooden chest waited exactly as they'd left it. Jack examined it more critically now, noting its solid construction and the precision of its brass fittings. This was no ordinary storage container, but a custom-built, secure vault designed to protect its contents for decades. "How are we going to move it?" Lily asked, running her hand along the polished wood. "It's super heavy." Jack considered their options. "We'll use the tractor and some ropes, but first let's make sure we've got everything." They opened the chest again, Jack making a careful inventory of its contents. Besides the journal and technical drawings they'd already examined, there were government documents marked classified, photographs of the research team, and personal letters between Frank and Dr. Harrington spanning decades. One folder contained what appeared to be legal documents, property deeds, mineral rights agreements, and most interestingly, a document titled Contingency Ownership Transfer, signed by Frank just 6 months before his death. Jack read it carefully, his heart racing as he grasped its implications. Frank had created a legal mechanism whereby ownership of the northern section of the property, including the Miller barn and everything beneath it, would transfer directly to Jack if certain conditions were met. If the bearer of this document presents the verification key within 30 days of the reading of my will, this transfer shall supersede all other bequests regarding the designated property. The verification key, it had to be the brass key that had opened both the chest and the hidden door. Frank had created a legal failsafe, ensuring that the technology would pass to Jack if he proved himself worthy by following the trail of clues. "Dad, look." Lily had been examining the chest's interior and discovered a hidden compartment in the lid. Inside was a sealed envelope addressed simply to Jack. With slightly trembling fingers, Jack opened it, unfolding several pages of Frank's distinctive handwriting. "Dear Jack, if you're reading this, you followed the path I laid out for you. You found the tractor's secret, located the Miller barn, and discovered what lies beneath. I always knew you would be the only one who truly learned to listen. What you've found isn't just a technological marvel, it's a responsibility. Project Horizon was decades ahead of its time, clean renewable energy that could have changed our nation's course. But powerful interests ensured it remained buried, too disruptive to their profits and control. I've protected this technology for most of my life, watching as the world became increasingly dependent on energy sources that poison our future. Dr. Harrington and I always believed that someday the right person would carry this knowledge forward when the world was finally ready to receive it. You are that person, Jack. You understand machines, yes, but more importantly, you understand responsibility and integrity. I've watched you rebuild your life after Lisa's passing, putting Lily's needs above your own, working with honest hands while never taking shortcuts. The legal documents included will transfer ownership of the Miller barn and surrounding 50 acres to you, completely separate from the main farm inheritance. Richard knows nothing of this arrangement. The golden bonds are yours as well. Use them to secure your future and protect what matters. But the greatest gift is the technology itself. Study it, understand it. When the time is right, share it with the world. But be careful, the same interest that buried it once will try again if given the opportunity. Trust Martha Jenkins. She knows more than she's let on and can help you navigate what comes next. And remember what I always told you, machines speak to those who truly listen. This technology has waited patiently for decades. Now it speaks to you. With love and faith, Frank, Jack lowered the letter, emotion tightening his throat. His grandfather had seen in him something he hadn't always recognized in himself. Not just mechanical aptitude, but the character needed to handle a legacy of this magnitude. What did Grandpa say, Brian? Lily leaned against his side, her presence grounding him in the midst of revelations that threatened to overwhelm. He left us a gift. Jack folded the letter carefully, and a job to do. They secured the chest with ropes, using the tractor's power to lower it carefully from the loft. The operation required all of Jack's mechanical creativity, creating a makeshift pulley system using the barn's sturdy beams controlling the descent inch by inch to prevent damage. When the chest finally rested on the trailer attached to the tractor, Jack secured it with additional ropes and a tarp for protection. The sun was already low on the horizon, painting the clearing with golden light that seemed to bless their efforts. As they prepared to leave, the distant sound of vehicles broke the forest's tranquility. Jack froze, listening intently as engines approached along the overgrown trail. Someone's coming. He helped Lily onto the tractor. We need to go. Now. He started the engine, its rumble suddenly seeming too loud in the quiet clearing. There was only one path wide enough for the tractor, and whoever was approaching would be coming along the same route. Hold on tight. Jack put the tractor in gear, searching desperately for an alternate escape route. The trees to the east looked slightly less dense, perhaps passable for the tractor's substantial bulk. They lurched forward, the John Deere's powerful engine straining as they left the trail and pushed into unbroken forest. Branches scraped against metal, and the trailer bounced precariously behind them. Through the trees, Jack caught glimpses of vehicles entering the clearing. Richard's black SUV and a white truck with the Oak Ridge Developments logo. They'd arrived a day earlier than announced, perhaps alerted by someone in town who had seen Jack purchasing supplies. The forest grew thicker, forcing Jack to navigate carefully between trees while maintaining enough speed to prevent pursuit. Lily clung to him, her face pressed against his back, small body tense with fear and excitement. They can't catch us, she shouted over the engine's roar. We're protecting Grandpa's secret. Her words crystallized something in Jack's mind, the purpose behind Frank's elaborate succession plan. This wasn't just about inheritance or even valuable technology. It was about protecting a vision of the future, one where energy came clean from the earth instead of being torn destructively from it. The tractor burst from the tree line into an open field, the Sullivan farmhouse visible in the distance. Jack increased speed, knowing they needed to reach the equipment barn before Richard realized what they'd taken. Behind them, the sound of vehicles gave way to silence. Perhaps their pursuers had been stymied by the dense forest, or perhaps they remained at the Miller barn, exploring the facility Jack and Lily had accidentally left powered up. Either way, Jack knew their window of opportunity was narrowing. They needed to secure the chest, study its contents thoroughly, and most importantly, contact whoever had inherited Dr. Harrington's role in protecting Project Horizon. As the tractor rumbled across familiar fields, Jack felt a strange sense of homecoming mixed with mission. Frank had entrusted him with something profound, not just mechanical marvels or hidden treasure, but a chance to make right what powerful interests had once buried. The equipment barn loomed ahead, its doors standing open like welcoming arms. Jack guided the tractor inside, cutting the engine and helping Lily down. Together, they unloaded the chest, sliding it into a hidden corner behind stacked hay bales. What now, Dad? Lily's face was flushed with excitement and apprehension. Jack knelt to her level, meeting her eyes directly. Now we keep Grandpa's promise. We protect what he gave us, and we figure out how to share it with the world the right way. Headlights swept across the barnyard as Richard's SUV approached faster than Jack had anticipated. The confrontation he had hoped to delay had found them anyway. Stay behind me, Jack whispered, positioning himself between Lily and the barn entrance. Remember, the tractor was Grandpa's gift to us, nothing else. The SUV skidded to a stop in a cloud of dust. Richard emerged, his tailored shirt now rumpled, his face twisted with suspicion and anger. Behind him, David Mercer exited more slowly, his expression calculating as he surveyed the barn. The golden evening light painted them all in amber tones as they faced each other across the threshold of the equipment barn. Jack protecting a legacy, Richard pursuing profit, and between them, the future of Project Horizon hanging in the balance. The SUV's tires kicked up gravel as it sped away, leaving Jack and Lily alone in the equipment barn's lengthening shadows. Jack waited until the sound of the engine faded before releasing a long-held breath. That confrontation had been too close. Richard's determination to claim what lay beneath the Miller barn was unmistakable, and Jack knew they had precious little time. "We need to move," Jack whispered, glancing at the concealed chest. "Richard won't give up that easily." Lily's eyes were wide but unafraid. "Where will we take Grandpa's treasure?" Jack considered their limited options. The motel was too public, the farm too obvious. They needed someone they could trust, someone who might understand the magnitude of what they discovered. "We're going to visit Miss Martha again," he decided, carefully securing the wooden chest beneath a tarp in his truck bed. He concealed it with tools and equipment that would attract no special attention if they were stopped. She knew Grandpa better than anyone. They drove in tense silence as twilight gathered around them, the Sullivan farmhouse receding in the rearview mirror. Jack's mind churned with questions. How much had Richard already discovered about Project Horizon? Who else knew about the underground facility? And most pressingly, how could he, a struggling single father with a failing garage business, possibly protect something of such immense value? Martha's porch light glowed like a beacon as they pulled into her driveway. She answered their knock immediately, as if she'd been waiting, concern etched in the lines of her face. "I saw Richard and that developer at the diner this afternoon," she said, ushering them inside. "They were asking questions about the northern section of Frank's property, about the old rumors." Jack followed her into the kitchen, the familiar scent of cinnamon and coffee wrapping around them like a protective blanket. "What rumors?" Martha filled a kettle and set it on the stove, her movements deliberately measured. "After the war, there was talk about government activities in these parts. Strange deliveries, unusual visitors. Most folks figured it was just Cold War paranoia." She paused, studying Jack's face. "But you know better now, don't you?" Jack placed Frank's journal on the kitchen table along with several technical drawings. Project Horizon. To his surprise, Martha nodded without shock. "Frank never told me specifics, but he made me promise to help you if you ever came asking about the Miller barn." She reached into a drawer and withdrew an envelope yellowed with age. "He left this with me about 10 years ago. Said if anything happened to him, I should give it to you when the time was right." The envelope contained a single sheet of paper with contact information for someone named Dr. Elena Harrington, along with a series of numbers that appeared to be geographic coordinates. "William Harrington's daughter," Martha explained, noting Jack's questioning look. "She's a professor at MIT now. Energy systems engineering. Frank stayed in touch with the Harrington family all these years." "William Harrington, the project leader?" Jack asked, pieces falling into place. "His family continued the work." "In secret, yes. After the government officially terminated the project, a small group continued to protect and develop the technology. Frank was the guardian of the physical installation, but others preserved the knowledge, waiting for the right time." Lily, who had been quietly exploring the kitchen, returned with a faded photograph from a shelf. "Is this you and Grandpa?" The image showed a much younger Martha and Frank standing beside the John Deere tractor, smiling in the summer sunshine. Martha's expression softened with memory. "Yes, dear, back when Frank first bought that tractor. He said it was the machine that would build everything else." Her eyes met Jack's meaningfully. He was right about that in more ways than one. Jack studied the photo, noting details he'd missed in the similar image from the metal box, the freshly turned earth behind them surveying the equipment, partially visible at the frame's edge. "You knew about the project from the beginning." "Not everything," Martha corrected gently, "but enough. My late husband worked security during the installation's construction. Frank trusted us to keep certain secrets." Jack's phone buzzed with an incoming text. The message from an unknown number sent ice through his veins. "Property records being pulled tomorrow morning. File verification immediately. Friend at county." Jack showed Martha the text. "Someone at the county records office is warning us. Richard's moving faster than I expected." Martha's expression turned resolute. "The county clerk's office opens at 8 a.m. We'll be there waiting." She glanced at her watch. "But first we need to secure that chest. It's not safe in your truck." It took all three of them to maneuver the heavy chest down Martha's narrow cellar stairs. Jack positioned it behind shelves of home-canned vegetables and preserves, concealing it with an old quilt. The contents would be safe here overnight, allowing them to focus on the legal battle that would begin in the morning. After settling Lily and Martha's spare bedroom, Jack and Martha spread Frank's papers across the kitchen table, planning their next moves by lamplight. Once the property transfer is secured, you'll need to contact Elena Harrington immediately, Martha advised. Frank believed the technology was finally ready for development, but he worried about the same interest that buried it the first time. This isn't just about clean energy, is it? Jack asked, studying the technical drawings, his mechanical mind filling in gaps. The design could be adapted for all sorts of applications. Martha nodded gravely. That's what Frank feared, that in the wrong hands, it would be weaponized or monopolized. The technology needs to enter the world the right way, with the right protections. And he trusted me with that. The weight of responsibility settled more deeply on Jack's shoulders. He chose you because you understand both the machines and the ethics, Martha said simply. Frank always said you had hands that could fix anything and a heart that knew what was worth fixing. Jack's throat tightened at the unexpected praise. In the years after Lisa's death, struggling with grief and single parenthood, he'd often felt like a failure, unable to save his wife, barely keeping his business afloat, frequently uncertain about his parenting. The idea that Frank had seen something more in him, something worthy of this monumental trust, was overwhelming. They worked late into the night organizing documents and developing contingency plans. Martha proved remarkably knowledgeable about the legal mechanisms Frank had established to protect his legacy. Frank prepared for everything, she explained, showing Jack additional paperwork she'd kept hidden for years, including the possibility that Richard might challenge the property transfer. Dawn broke clear and cool, the kitchen windows framing a sky painted in watercolor shades of pink and gold. Jack checked on Lily, still soundly asleep in the spare bedroom, before joining Martha for coffee. I called in some favors, she said, sliding a mug toward him. Jane Williams at the county clerk's office will meet us at 7:30 before they officially open, and Carl Peterson at First National has agreed to authenticate the verification key immediately. What about the Miller barn? Jack asked. Richard and Mercer will be back there today. Already handled. Martha's eyes twinkled with mischief. Sheriff Davis is an old friend. He's going to escort them off the property. This morning, apparently there's been a complaint about unauthorized surveying. Jack raised an eyebrow. A complaint from whom? The property's legal caretaker until the estate is settled. Martha smiled. Me. Armed with Frank's documents and the crucial verification key, they arrived at the Riverdale County Administration Building precisely at 7:30. Jane Williams, a gray-haired woman with efficient movements, waited at the employee's entrance. Martha Jenkins. She nodded in greeting. And you must be Jack Sullivan. Frank spoke highly of you. She ushered them inside without further pleasantries. Richard's attorney called yesterday afternoon asking about property records for the Sullivan farm, specifically the northern section. In the empty records office, Jane moved with practiced efficiency, retrieving files and preparing forms. The contingency transfer Frank arranged is unusual but legally sound. Once we verify the key and file these documents, the northern 50 acres will be separated from the estate, transferring directly to you. Jack placed the brass key on her desk along with Frank's signed authorization. Jane examined both carefully, then made a phone call. Minutes later, Carl Peterson from the bank arrived carrying an official-looking folder. This matches the verification protocol Frank established, he confirmed after examining the key. The notarized document requires both physical verification of the key and my personal confirmation that it matches the security image on file. Jack watched as the banker photographed the key from several angles, then compared the images to something in his folder. Perfect match, Carl announced. As Frank's executor, I can confirm this triggers the contingency clause in his will. Jane stamped several documents, made notations in county records, and finally handed Jack a thick envelope. Congratulations, Mr. Sullivan. You are now the legal owner of the northern 50 acres of Sullivan property, including all structures and mineral rights. This documentation makes it official. Relief flooded through Jack. The first crucial step in securing Frank's legacy was complete. Thank you, both of you. Frank Sullivan was a good man, Jane said simply. Whatever he wanted to protect on that land must be important. They were preparing to leave when the main door opened. Richard stormed in, followed by a thin man carrying a leather briefcase, who could only be his attorney. Richard froze upon seeing Jack, his expression cycling rapidly through surprise, suspicion, and fury. "What are you doing here?" he demanded, advancing toward the counter. Jack held up the envelope containing the property transfer documents. "Taking care of some paperwork. Family business." The attorney stepped forward. "Mr. Warner has concerns about potentially irregular property arrangements in his grandfather's estate. We're here to examine the records." Jane Williams straightened to her full, though modest height. "All records are available for public review during normal business hours. We open at 8 a.m. "This is urgent," Richard insisted. "We have reason to believe there may be fraudulent activity involving valuable assets of the estate." Martha's voice cut through the tension, her tone pleasant, but carrying an unmistakable edge. "Are you accusing the county clerk's office of fraud, Richard? Because that's a serious allegation." The attorney placed a restraining hand on Richard's arm. "No accusations. We simply want to verify that all transfers related to the Sullivan property have followed proper legal procedures." "Everything is in order," Carl Peterson interjected with the calm authority of a longtime banker. "As the executor of Frank Sullivan's estate, I've personally verified the documentation." Richard's gaze locked on the envelope in Jack's hand, comprehension dawning. "The northern section. You've filed the transfer." His face flushed with anger. "That land is part of my inheritance. Whatever scheme you and Frank cooked up won't hold up in court." "It's all perfectly legal," Jack replied, keeping his voice level despite the adrenaline coursing through him. "Frank left provisions in his will that have now been executed according to his wishes." Richard stepped closer, lowering his voice to a threatening whisper. "You have no idea what you're getting involved in. That land is worth millions, not for housing, but for what's underneath. People with serious resources want what's there." "Then they should have talked to Frank while he was alive," Jack responded, meeting his cousin's gaze steadily. "Now they'll need to talk to me." The standoff might have escalated further if the office door hadn't opened again, admitting Sheriff Davis, a tall man with salt and pepper hair, and the weathered face of someone who spent considerable time outdoors. "Morning, folks," he nodded casually, though his eyes assessed the tense scene with professional awareness. "Everything all right here, Jane?" "Just fine, Sheriff," Jane replied with deliberate brightness. "Mr. Warner and his attorney were just leaving since we don't officially open for another 20 minutes. Richard recognized defeat, at least for the moment. "This isn't over, Jack. That technology belongs to the estate, to the family." "I am family," Jack reminded him quietly. "And Frank made his choice about who should carry this forward." Outside, the morning had fully bloomed sunlight warming the small town streets, just beginning to stir with activity. Jack escorted Martha back to her car, the precious envelope secure in his jacket pocket. "That was just the first round," Martha cautioned as they drove toward her house. "Richard won't give up easily, especially with developers and investors pushing him." "I know," Jack acknowledged, "but we've secured the legal foundation. Now we need to contact Dr. Harrington and figure out how to protect the technology itself." When they arrived at Martha's house, Lily was awake and had somehow managed to prepare a wobbly but earnest attempt at breakfast, slightly burned toast and orange juice in mismatched glasses. "I made breakfast because you guys had important grown-up business," she announced proudly. "Did we win? Did we save Grandpa's secret?" Jack lifted her in a hug, his heart swelling with love for this resilient child. "The first battle, yes, the land legally belongs to us now." Martha's phone rang as they were finishing breakfast. Her expression grew serious as she listened. "I see, thank you for letting me know." She hung up and turned to Jack. "That was Sheriff Davis. Richard and Mercer returned to the Miller barn with private security personnel. The sheriff ordered them off the property based on the new ownership, but they're regrouping. They'll be back with lawyers and possibly court orders." "We need to move fast," Jack decided. "Get the chest to somewhere secure and contact Dr. Harrington immediately." After retrieving the wooden chest from Martha's cellar and transferring it to Jack's truck, Martha handed him another sealed envelope. "Frank left this with me as well. Directions to a safe location somewhere to store the chest until you can connect with Elena Harrington." The directions led them not toward the highway as Jack expected, but deeper into the countryside along back roads that wound through rolling farmland. After 20 minutes of driving, they turned onto a narrow gravel lane marked only by a weathered mailbox bearing the name Johnson. The lane ended at a modest farmhouse with a large metal workshop behind it. An older man in overalls emerged from the shop, wiping his hands on a rag. His weathered face broke into a smile when he recognized Martha in the passenger seat. "Robert Johnson," Martha explained as they parked. "Frank's army buddy from the war. They served in the same engineering unit." Robert approached the truck, his eyes crinkling with recognition as he studied Jack's face. "You look just like Frank did at your age. He said you might be coming." His gaze shifted to Lily, then to the chest visible beneath the tarp in the truck bed. "You found it then. Good. We've been waiting a long time." Inside the workshop, Robert revealed something unexpected. A concrete bunker built beneath the floor, accessed by a hydraulic lift, disguised as an ordinary section of flooring. "Frank and I built this back in '55, he explained, operating the controls that lowered the platform. "Originally for civil defense fallout shelter, but we modified it over the years." The underground space was surprisingly large and well-equipped, with reinforced walls, independent power, and ventilation systems, and modern security features that seemed at odds with the vintage agricultural equipment in the workshop above. "This place has been maintained continuously," Jack observed, noting the updated electronics and relatively recent manufacturing dates on some equipment. Robert nodded. "Project Horizon never really shut down, son. It just went dormant, waiting for the right time. Frank was the primary guardian, but there were always others of us keeping watch." "Others?" Jack asked, helping to maneuver the chest onto the platform. "A network," Martha explained. "Scientists, engineers, veterans who believed in the project's potential. They've kept the technology secure for decades, updating security, preserving knowledge, waiting for the moment when it could safely emerge." In the bunker, Robert unlocked a sophisticated communication system concealed behind an ordinary-looking cabinet. "This is a secure line to Elena Harrington. Frank made sure we stayed current with the technology even as we got older." He punched in a code and a screen flickered to life. Moments later, they were looking at a woman in her early 50s with intelligent eyes and her father's determined jawline. "Robert?" She nodded in greeting, then her gaze shifted to Jack. "And you must be Jack Sullivan. My father spoke highly of you, though you never met." Jack blinked in surprise. "Dr. William Harrington knew about me. He and Frank stayed in regular contact until my father's passing 5 years ago," Elena confirmed. "They always discussed who would eventually carry Project Horizon forward. Your name came up often. The revelation that he'd been part of Frank and William Harrington's plans for years without knowing it left Jack momentarily speechless. How long had his grandfather been evaluating him, testing his character and capabilities? Lily, fascinated by the underground bunker and the technology it contained, broke the silence. "Are you the scientist who's going to help us save Grandpa's secret machine?" Elena smiled, her professional demeanor softening. "I'm part of the team that's been waiting for this moment. Your grandfather protected something incredibly valuable technology that could help solve our energy crisis without destroying the environment." The discussion that followed was detailed and urgent. Elena explained that she led a consortium of researchers and ethical investors prepared to develop Project Horizon's technology under rigorous oversight to prevent monopolization or weaponization. "The facility beneath the Miller barn contains the original prototype," she explained. "But the real value is in the research data and technical specifications in that chest. Frank and my father refined the designs for decades after the official project shut down." Robert spread out a map of the region. "Richard and his developer friend have filed for expedited permits to begin extraction on the property. They're representing it as a conventional energy development project." "They don't understand what they're dealing with," Elena warned. "If they attempt to access the underground facility without proper protocols, they could damage systems that have been maintaining equilibrium for decades." Jack thought about the blue glow he'd seen when they activated the facility. "The power source, it's not conventional, is it?" "No," Elena confirmed. "That's why this technology was buried in the first place. It harnesses energy in ways that threaten too many powerful interests. It's clean, renewable, and nearly limitless when properly implemented." The urgency of their situation crystallized for Jack. This wasn't just about an inheritance dispute or even valuable technology. It was about a potential revolution in energy production that could transform global economics and environmental challenges if it could be protected long enough to be properly introduced. "What do we need to do?" he asked, decision made. "Secure the facility," Elena replied without hesitation. Install the updated control systems we've prepared. Then transfer the research materials to our secure facility in Massachusetts. She leaned closer to the camera. But Jack, you need to understand the risks. The same interests that buried this technology once will fight to control or destroy it again. And they have resources far beyond what Richard and his developer can bring to bear. Jack thought about Lily, about the struggling garage, about the life he'd been barely holding together. Taking on this responsibility meant potential danger, certain disruption, and an uncertain future. Yet the alternative, allowing this technology to be exploited or buried again, felt like a betrayal of Frank's trust and humanity's needs. Lily tugged at his sleeve, sensing his internal conflict. Dad, remember what you always tell me when we're fixing something really complicated. One connection at a time, and pretty soon the whole system works. The simple wisdom hit Jack like a revelation. He didn't need to solve every aspect of this monumental challenge immediately. He just needed to take the next right step, then the next. We secure the facility first, he decided. Tonight. Or Elena nodded approval. I can have a technical team there by tomorrow afternoon. But the initial security needs to happen immediately before Richard can bring legal or physical force to bear. Robert moved to a storage cabinet and retrieved what looked like ordinary farming equipment, but was clearly something more. Frank and I prepared for this day. We have everything you'll need. For the next hour, they developed a detailed plan. Jack would return to the Miller barn that night to install specialized security devices designed to protect the facility from unauthorized access. Martha would file additional legal paperwork, creating a conservation easement on the property, adding another layer of protection against development. Robert would activate the remaining members of the Project Horizon network, bringing additional resources to their cause. As afternoon stretched toward evening, Jack recognized they needed to move Lily somewhere safer before the night's activities. Is there somewhere she can stay tonight? He asked Martha. I don't want her anywhere near the Miller barn while Richard's people might be watching. She can stay with me, Martha offered immediately. I've got my grandson's old room all made up, and nobody would think to look for her there. Lily protested, initially wanting to be part of the mission, but Jack knelt to explain. Remember how in chess the king needs protection? You're the most important piece in this game, Peanut. I need to know you're safe so I can focus on protecting Grandpa's legacy. With Lily reluctantly settled at Martha's house, Jack prepared for the night operation. Robert provided specialized equipment disguised as ordinary tools, along with a crash course in the security systems they would be installing. These will link directly to Elena's monitoring systems, Robert explained, demonstrating a device that looked like a simple circuit breaker. Any unauthorized entry will trigger immediate alerts and activate containment protocols. As twilight deepened toward night, Jack loaded the equipment into his truck and prepared to depart. Robert clasped his shoulder in a gesture of solidarity. Frank chose well. You've got the same look in your eyes he had during the war, that mixture of determination and decency that made us all willing to follow him. Jack drove toward the Sullivan farm under a canopy of stars, the equipment secured behind the seat, Frank's journal in his pocket. The responsibility he'd inherited felt simultaneously overwhelming and clarifying, as if his life's scattered pieces were finally revealing their pattern. He parked a quarter-mile from the Miller barn, concealing his truck behind a stand of trees. The remaining distance he covered on foot, moving silently through the woods, as Frank had taught him on childhood hunting trips. The forest seemed to welcome him, branches parting paths appearing where he needed them. The Miller barn stood silhouetted against the night sky, its stone walls solid and enduring in the moonlight. Jack circled carefully, checking for signs of surveillance or security. Finding none, he approached the hidden entrance, using the brass key to activate the mechanism. The stone door slid open silently, revealing the passageway leading down to the underground facility. Jack switched on his flashlight, its beam cutting through the darkness as he descended into the heart of Project Horizon. The main chamber remained as they had left it, though Jack noticed subtle changes, evidence that Richard and Mercer had indeed explored the facility before being escorted off the property. Files had been moved, control panels examined, but the core systems appeared untouched. Working methodically, Jack installed the security devices according to Robert's instructions. Each component linked to the next, creating a protective network around the facility's most critical systems. The work required both mechanical precision and careful integration with the existing technology, exactly the kind of challenge his hands and mind were trained for. As he connected the final component, the system hummed to life, status, lights blinking in sequence, as it established communication with Elena's distant monitoring station. Jack stepped back, surveying his work with professional satisfaction. Whatever happened next, the heart of Project Horizon was now protected from those who would exploit or destroy it. He was preparing to leave when headlights swept across the clearing, outside vehicle approaching fast multiple sets. Jack extinguished his flashlight, moving swiftly to the stone door's control panel. Through a small observation port, he could see Richard's SUV and two other vehicles disgorging men with flashlights in what appeared to be security uniforms. Jack activated the door's closing mechanism, the stone panel sliding silently shut, just as the first flashlight beams probed the barn's interior. The security system he'd installed would prevent them from accessing the underground facility, but he was now effectively trapped inside. Elena had warned this might happen. The contingency plan required him to descend deeper into the facility using maintenance passages to reach an emergency exit that emerged nearly a half-mile away near the creek that bordered Sullivan property. Jack moved through the darkened facility with only the small beam of his backup penlight following diagrams Robert had provided. The deeper passages felt older somehow, the air carrying scents of earth and water. The sound of flowing water grew louder as he descended, eventually opening into a chamber Frank's journal hadn't mentioned. Natural stone walls curved around a pool of water that glowed with the same blue luminescence Jack had observed in the gauge from Frank's bedroom. At the center of the pool, a crystalline structure pulsed with energy, sending ripples of blue light across the water's surface. This was it, the heart of Project Horizon, the energy source that had been deemed too revolutionary, too disruptive to existing power structures. Jack stood transfixed, understanding flowing through him like the currents visible in the glowing water. This wasn't just clean energy, it was a fundamental shift in how humanity could power its future. A narrow walkway circled the pool, leading to a small control station, and beyond it a metal door marked emergency exit. Jack moved carefully along the path, conscious of both the wonder and danger surrounding him. The control panel displayed readings in a format he didn't recognize, but the system appeared stable, humming with contained power. At the exit door, he paused, consulting the map Robert had provided. Once outside, he would need to circle back through the woods to reach his truck without being spotted by Richard's security team. The door opened with surprising ease, revealing a narrow tunnel that sloped upward toward the surface. Emerging into the night air beside the creek, Jack oriented himself using the stars. The woods were quiet except for the gentle sound of flowing water and the distant hooting of an owl. No flashlights or voices betrayed the presence of searchers. He made his way carefully through the forest, stopping occasionally to listen for pursuit. The truck waited undisturbed where he'd left it, a small victory in what promised to be a long campaign. As he drove back toward Martha's house where Lily slept safely, Jack felt a strange sense of peace despite the dangers ahead. Frank had entrusted him with something profound, not just technology or property, but a vision of possibility, a chance to help humanity move toward a better future. The tractor had been just the beginning, the key that unlocked everything else exactly as Frank had intended. The real journey was just beginning, with challenges and adversaries more powerful than Richard. But Jack Sullivan, the mechanic who knew how to listen to machines and to the quiet voice of conscience, was ready. Martha was waiting on the porch when he arrived, her face relaxing with relief as he stepped from the truck. "It's done," Jack nodded, the weight of the night's work and revelations evident in his measured movements. "The facility is secured. Elena's team will arrive tomorrow to begin the next phase." Inside, Lily slept peacefully in the guest bedroom, her Explorer backpack propped beside the bed, ready for the next adventure. Jack watched her for a moment, thinking about the future they were helping to secure, not just for her, but for generations to come. In Frank's journal, the final entry had puzzled Jack initially. The machine that builds everything else isn't made of metal and gears. It's made of vision and courage, passed from one generation to the next. Standing in the doorway of his daughter's temporary room, watching her chest rise and fall, with the easy rhythm of childhood sleep, Jack finally understood. Frank's true legacy wasn't the technology hidden beneath the Miller barn, or even the tractor that had led them to it. It was the courage to protect something valuable for future generations, the vision to see beyond immediate profit to longer horizons, and the wisdom to know when it was time to pass that responsibility forward. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Richard's legal maneuvers, the arrival of Elena's team, the complex process of preparing Project Horizon's technology for its proper introduction to the world. But tonight, in this moment of quiet between battles, Jack embraced the fullness of the inheritance. Frank had truly left him, not just machines to be fixed, but a world to be healed one connection at a time.